Enter to win a new Surfskate every month at surfskate.love/giveaway. The Hamboards Classic is their largest deck in their lineup. It's 78 inches long, which is 4 inches longer than I am tall. And with a width of 15 inches, it gives you a massive platform to play on. And while I love the deck, the Hamboards trucks are not my personal favorite. They give you a lot of rail-to-rail lean, but they don't produce thrust like typical Surfskate trucks, which makes them harder to pump. And a lot of people will use land paddles with these massive Hamboards decks, but that's no fun for me. So I'm going to replace these Hamboards trucks with a waterborne surf adapter, and we'll see how that changes the ride. So as you can see, this thing is going to be a beast to deal with. And on these really big, wide, and heavy decks, I like to use reverse kingpin trucks with the waterborne surf adapter. So on this one, I'm going to use a waterborne Dream adapter, which has a reverse kingpin integrated into it. It's a nice, clean design. I'm also using the waterborne rail adapter on the rear because I found that on these longboards, the rail adapter is absolutely essential because what it does is helps to keep your back wheels in contact with the ground, which on these longboards is an issue because as you stand in the middle of the deck, it's flexing and it's kind of pushing your wheels up off the ground. So rail adapter, absolutely essential for me. I'm also going to replace the waterborne bushings with Riptide bushings. The waterborne bushings come in 85A durometer standard, and that's a little bit too soft for my weight, so I'm going to go a little bit harder with these Riptide bushings. I'm also going to replace the surf adapter bushing because it also is 85A, which is too soft for my weight. So this will stiffen that up a little bit and that'll work better for my weight. And then I'm going to finish it off with Surfskate Love 70mm 78A wheels. I want the bigger and softer because I'm going to be traveling long distances and I want to have really good grip. And then we'll top it off with G-Bomb bearings, which in my humble opinion are the absolute best bearings money can buy. The first thing we're going to do is remove these trucks, and this is a bit of a challenge because Hamboards uses bigger bolts and nuts than you typically use, so I can't use a skate tool on these. It's not going to fit. So I actually will have to use pliers and an Allen wrench here on the other side. Alright, so now let's replace the bushings on my waterborne surf and rail adapter. So in the surf adapter, you'll find that you have two sets of washers and bearings. The first goes up here, and then the second bigger set goes down in here. And I just use a little screwdriver like this to fish these ones out. Like so. And now we need to get this bushing off, and this can be a bit of a trick. So to do this, we have to hammer this kingpin, and in order to not damage the kingpin, we want to make sure that we put that kingpin nut back on over the top, and then when we hammer, we're going to be hitting that nut and not the kingpin. So let's go do this. I'm going to need pliers to pull this out. That's wedged in there pretty tight. Okay, and now we will take our replacement Riptide bushing and shove it in there if we can, because that was a tight fit. I might have to hammer this thing in. And when it comes to working with the waterborne surf adapter, you'll notice that one end has very sharp edges and then the other end of it has rounded off edges. So these rounded off edges are going to be easier to go down into that hole like this. Put the kingpin back through. And there we go. Our surf adapter bushing is replaced. And now I'm going to keep all this apart because we're going to install this onto the deck one piece at a time here. And now what I'm going to do is attach this RKP to the rail adapter, and these bushings have already been replaced because I've already used this one. And Waterborne has recently made a really great update to their surf and rail adapters, which is that these are pre-threaded. And that means that you don't have to have nuts on the other side of them. These bolts will just screw right into there. And that is a huge help with this Waterborne stuff. Just like so, no nut needed. Another really great update they've made to the rail adapter is that this hole used to be smaller and it used to make contact with the kingpin, and that would make a rattling noise as you rode. And what they did was cut a bigger hole and then put a little plastic washer in there, and so now you don't have any metal on metal contact, and that also is a fantastic upgrade on that rail adapter. Alright, so we got a mess here, but we're going to make sense of it. My next step is to install this top surf adapter base plate onto the deck. And Waterborne provides these little pads that you can put between the adapter and the deck, which I like to use because I think it dampens the noise a little bit. And once again, we don't need any nuts. All we have to do is screw directly into that base plate with the pre-threaded holes. And now to get these bearings and washers back on, I need to flip this back over like so. And now we will take our larger set of bearings and washers, and those go right back in there. Now we take this surf adapter piece like so. And then followed by our top set of washers and bearings in there. And then our kingpin nut. And we want to make sure that's snug without being too tight. We don't want to have any play in there. And I feel like that's probably just a touch too tight. So I'm going to back that off just a little bit. And I think that's good play right there. And now we're going to replace those bushings. Alright, so there is our surf adapter. Now let's work on the rail adapter. And the first thing we'll do is we'll install our truck onto this top base plate. And what's going to determine how we orient this is there's really only one way this can go. If we put it this way, you'll see that it's going to get in the way of that bushing there. So we really have to install it this way, and then that gives us room for our bushings on either side. And then that's going to determine the orientation of how this rail adapter sits on our deck, because you'll notice that these plates have these grooves here and here. And if you align your rail adapter like this, what will end up happening is your bolts are aligned. And so what can happen is if your bolts are too long, you can knock them against each other as the rail adapter is moving like this. So this is intended to be reversed so that you have these notches here on the opposite side of these. And what that does is make sure that those bolts aren't going to knock against each other as they're going back and forth. So once we have this on here, like so, well, then that's going to tell us that this is going to sit on our deck like so. So there's that, and now let's install this bottom base plate to the deck. And again, we're going to orient like, well, we've got to have our pivot cups out. So actually that's going to mean that this is going to sit on the deck like so. So now when we install this pivot cups out, you'll see that we've got the notches up here on this one, and then the notches back here on this one, which means that we won't have any issues with those bolts sticking down there. Now it's time for wheels and bearings. So there we have it, our completed Hamboards Classic. So let's take her out and see how she rides.